Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another mindfulness broadcast. Really happy to have you here. I'm Theo, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit today about steadiness. And I will go ahead and, oh, wait, I was going to share my screen. Give me a moment. Need to put this into presenter view real quickly. And I'll take you through some slides because everybody wants some slides on a Friday morning, right? Okay, here we go. So, this is a quote from a famous Buddhist text called the Dhammapada. If by giving up a lesser happiness, one could experience a greater happiness, a wise person would renounce the lesser to behold the greater. So, in some senses, that's what we're up to. Um, and if you were an evolutionary psychologist, you might say that what we're up to is we're learning how to adapt to a long-term environment, even though we evolved to be in a short-term environment. And that takes some training, some mental training. So that's kind of what we're up to. And this is a list of characteristics that is from a book called Neurodharma by Dr. Rick Hanson. So he's a psychologist and a researcher, and he's also a practitioner and a teacher. And he talks about this idea of steadiness, lovingness, fullness, wholeness, nowness, allness, and timelessness. And today, what I want to focus on is steadiness. So, the idea within steadiness is that we're able to be undisturbed, to be still, and to be focused. And it takes some training. I think most of us know what it feels like to be unsteady, right? So something happens and we get thrown off whatever balance beam we might have been trying to balance on. And suddenly we find ourselves in the muck. Um, I wanted to offer my own story of this. Last Thursday, I was teaching actually. I was doing a little empower teaching, and I heard a noise outside of my office. It was like a big bang, and I was like, "Wow, that was pretty loud." And I saw a truck out there, and it stopped, and then I don't know what happened, but I was in the middle of teaching, so I was trying to just concentrate on that. And then later that afternoon, I went out to the street to my car, and not one of my cars, but both of my cars were just bashed. And there was no note, there was no nothing. So, this is just an example of life showing up in ways that are uninvited, right? So, we have these circumstances. In this case, it's a hit and run. And then 2 days later, I was parked in a parking garage. I live in Portland, so you can imagine what's coming next. And I went back to get my car, and the same car, that one of the same cars that had gotten bashed, had a broken out back window. So I'm calling this my car karma. I don't know what I did. Uh, I don't know what I did to create this effect. Maybe I didn't do anything. Who knows? But the idea is that life is visiting me and it's creating some big feelings, right? It's creating some anger, some sadness, some overwhelm in the sense that, like, do I really have time to deal with all these insurance claims and take my car into the shop and get a rental car and all the things that are required when we're dealing with these types of situations, right? And then how does steadiness come into play, right? How does my practice help me to be steady in these types of circumstances? And admittedly, this is a pretty minor situation in the scheme of things, right? No one's hurt, no one's ill. It's really just more a feeling of, okay, so, there's a lot of time that's represented by this. There's also money. There's also a sense of security that maybe gets affected. So there's things to investigate, but in the scheme of things, it's a pretty nothing burger. but it's also an opportunity to practice. Another way we can think of steadiness is we can think of it in terms of what's called metacognition, right? So if we're kind of shifting from mindfulness and steadiness to a more kind of Western psychological research based idea, we're talking about metacognition. We're talking about how our practice allows us to relate to our minds in a different way and therefore have more spaciousness in order to walk through these challenges with that steadiness. So, one way that we can unpack that is we can talk about the shift in the way that we relate to our own mind, which is sometimes described as witness consciousness. And this comes from a book by a guy named Robert Wright called Why Buddhism is True. And he's really just taking a look at the evolutionary psychology approach to Buddhism, and why Buddhism addresses some of what they've discovered to be wrong with our brains, essentially, right? The environmental mismatch and some of the stuff that we talk about. And this witness consciousness and the quality that it creates allows us to see our thoughts as essentially passing trains. And they're things that are coming kind of almost from the ether rather than emanating from us, right? And that creates that critical distance that allows us to have more space, more agency, more distance from our impulses so that we can relate to whatever arrives in our life in a more skillful way. And again, that idea of shifting from maybe a short-term happiness, which sometimes, at least for me, comes in the form of avoidance, like, oh, I just don't even want to deal, right? I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen. And yet, that's the short term. And the long term is, okay, what if I walk through this discomfort? What am I creating long term that's actually more steady, more stable? So I hope that was helpful. I want to go ahead and get into a little practice in the remaining 6 or 7 minutes that we have together. So I'm going to invite you to just notice where you are in time and space. So just take a look around you, use your eyes to just take in the space where you are. Or if you don't have that possibility, then use your other senses, perhaps your ears or your touch. Just notice where you are. And then if it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes or just leave them half closed and take a couple of intentional breaths. So you can breathe in deeply to the count of 3, hold for a moment, and out for a count of 6. 3, 4, 5, 6, and then pause. And then again in for the count of 3, hold, out, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then let your breath rest in its natural rhythm. And then notice that sense of pressure that you feel underneath you, whether it's in your chair or under your feet. And notice that even in those sensations, we can experience a sense of steadiness, physical steadiness, being held by gravity to the earth. And then notice whatever is here for you. It's a Friday morning. Maybe you've got a lot of work ahead of you. Maybe there's certain work or certain interactions that are preoccupying your mind. Maybe there's some other situations, life showing up in the way that it does, causing some kind of disturbance, small, medium, or large. How can we hold all of the stories and the thoughts that we hold about these circumstances at a little bit of a distance, almost like we're holding them in our hands at arm's length? We can even ask ourselves, how do I want to relate to these circumstances? Continue to notice the sensation of breathing. Continue to notice the sensation of pressure underneath you, steadiness. How am I relating to my own thoughts, my own feelings? How might I shift that relationship intentionally? Find a little more ease, a little more harmony, perhaps a little less reactivity, a little more responsiveness. How can I apply wisdom to the way that I relate to my own life? And just allow yourself to notice what comes. Breathing in and breathing out. Noticing thoughts, noticing sensations. Gently returning from a thought train if we've started to go on a thought train. Knowing that even in the past few minutes that we've been practicing, we've been training our brain. We've been developing the skill of steadiness. And then when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to slowly come back into the space where you are. Say hello to Friday morning. Perhaps stretch out your arms, slowly open your eyes. Well, we finished a minute early. How's everybody doing? Got some hearts? That's good. Okay. So, my invitation to you is to carry that sense of steadiness, whatever steadiness you've been able to conjure in this short period we've had. Just carry that into the day in whatever way feels possible for you. Maybe set a timer on your phone or your watch. And when the timer goes off, just remind yourself steadiness. Just take a couple of breaths and repeat that idea, steadiness. All right. Wishing everyone a lovely, lovely day, a lovely weekend. Thanks for being with us. And I'll see you next week.